Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Remember the Girls' sixth webinar of our 2021 webinar series. Remember the Girls is a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting and advocating for female carriers and patients of X-linked disorders, a group often overlooked by the medical profession. This webinar is being held in partnership with Angel Aid. Angel Aid is a 501c3 organization with the purpose to source research, relief, and inspiration for mothers of children with rare diseases. They are holding a Voice of the Rare Carrier workshop for carriers of all types of genetic diseases from June 21st to July 27th of this year. Applications are due June 15th, and to apply, you can head to angelaidcares.org/rare-carriers, and I'll send that in the chat as well. I'm Taylor Kane, the founder and executive director of Remember the Girls and the moderator for today's event. The topic of this webinar is our Father's Day special. Of course, Father's Day is coming up next Sunday, and how you can support your carrier wife, mother, or daughter. So we'd like to thank the sponsors of our 2021 webinar series, Horizon Therapeutics, Bluebird Bio, Ultragenyx Pharmaceutical, and Sanofi Genzyme. Today, we are joined by Joey, Greg, Rick, and Jim, who will be talking about their connection to the X-linked community and the carrier women in their lives. For carriers of X-linked diseases, it's so important to have a strong support system with whom you can talk about your carrier status and the different emotions and hardships that are associated with it. These four men are going to speak about the ways they support the carrier women in their lives. So if you have any questions for our speakers in the chat, please just send them whenever they arise. This is also being recorded, so you'll be able to watch this at a later date. Or for anyone who has missed this, they'll be able to go back on our YouTube channel and website and watch this as well. Okay, so let's get started. We're just going to start off by some introductions, and I'm just going to go in order of who's on my screen. So Joey, if you want to go first, just tell us a little bit about you, your connection to the X-linked community, and the carrier women in your life.
Definitely. So my name is Joey Branham. I'm 36 years old, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona. My wife, Jessica, is an X-linked carrier. She is a carrier of a disorder called MECP2 duplication syndrome. The syndrome primarily affects boys, although some girls can be affected. The hallmark traits of this disorder are developmental delay, a compromised immune system. Most of these children have difficulty walking. Most are nonverbal, and unfortunately, a lot of them pass away before the age of 20 due to typical complications from things like pneumonia and seizure activity. Obviously, becoming a parent is scary enough, and when you then add in, a genetic disorder on top of that, it can make things extremely challenging. We found out my wife was a carrier shortly after my son's diagnosis. And ever since, we have not only been advocating for the disorder itself, but we've actually decided to, continue to expand our family using IVF. So we're currently on that journey, which has another layer of challenges, but we're very confident that by doing IVF, we can help eliminate the disorder itself by not having any more children that have the disorder. And so as far as supporting my wife, the amount of support you normally receive when you have a child, I mean, they say it takes a village, and so our village is actually pretty small. And then when we learned that she was a carrier of MECP2 duplication syndrome, our support circle shrank a little bit. There was a lot of family members who unfortunately kind of made themselves scarce, I guess is a good way to put it. I don't think they understood what was going on, or maybe they're a little scared to try to be involved. And when we started the IVF process, usually there's a very large community that you can be a part of, but because we don't have any infertility issues and we're not a same-sex couple, almost everybody kind of gives us a side eye. They don't treat my wife, like she's a part of that community. So the support circle that she has is very, very small. It's only a handful of people. So it's extremely important for me to be able to support her in anything that she needs. And yeah.
Thanks, Joey. Thanks for sharing. Jessica did speak, as you probably know, on one of our webinars a couple of months ago. And I know that she is very open about the journey she's going through, and she has a blog and does a lot of like advocacy on social media. So I love, her openness to sharing. And I know like through Remember the Girls, she has met some other carriers who are going through the IVF process as well. And like you said, when people think of IVF, they think of infertility. They don't think of using it for a genetic reason. So, that group of women is small, but I'm glad that she's been able to find some other people in our group who are also going through that as well. And it sounds like you are able to support her, which is amazing. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Jim, we'll have Jim next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim O'Loughlin. I live in California, and my connection to the Xlink community is threefold. I'm a husband to my wife, who's a carrier. I'm a father to my daughter, who's a carrier, and a son-in-law to my mother-in-law, who is also a carrier. I guess my story begins when I met my wife about 18 years ago. We were in our 30s. When we met, we both kind of just knew, right? We fell in love real quickly. And some of our first conversations were about, how many kids do you want? And Crystal's answer was 5. And through getting to know each other, she shared with me that she was the youngest of 5 children. I'm the youngest of 6. And 3 of her middle 3 brothers were diagnosed with a rare disease called mucopolysaccharidosis, or MPS, also known as Hunter's syndrome. And the 3 of them passed in their teens. So she lost 3 brothers. And I can just remember looking at what a wonderful, vivacious, sparkling person she was. And so in that exchange, she also explained that she's a carrier herself. And so it was my first introduction to the Xlink world. It didn't drive me away, it drove me closer to her, intrigued at how amazing she was, having gone through the childhood, that she had gone through. So we were quickly engaged within 9 months, married 10 months later, and started talking about having children of our own, and what that meant. And we were interested in doing genetic testing as early as we could. And in fact, at the time in the States, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you had to wait several months into the pregnancy in order to have that kind of genetic testing. So we actually went outside of the US. We went to Australia through amniocentesis, sent samples to Australia so that we were able to determine that my daughter was a carrier. Did not have MPS, but she was a carrier. I should preface it by saying that we were unsuccessful. We had a few misses in our pregnancy attempts leading up to having our daughter. So by the time we had Chloe, who's now 14, I was 40, and Crystal, my wife, was 37. So we were one and done. So we have Chloe in our life. I'm surrounded by not only 3 generations of carriers, but my wife is the founder of Angel Aid, which Taylor mentioned earlier, which is a nonprofit supporting rare mothers. So we sort of live in the X-linked community daily. My daughter has been exposed at a very early age to run walks, fundraisers. We've been to Washington, D.C. to meet with our senators to lobby for appropriation language to be put into bill so that we can do these kinds of genetic tests as a normal everyday thing. So I hope that gives a good background. Happy to answer questions as we move along.
Yeah, that was so great, Jim. Thanks so much for sharing that and taking us through your journey. And I know that so many women in the rare disease community as a whole are so appreciative of the work that Crystal does and has done for years to support rare mothers, whether they're carriers, whether they're not, whether they're patients themselves. We know that women usually, are the caregivers in families. Obviously that's starting to change, but a lot of, responsibilities do fall on them. And I think that Crystal has just done such an amazing job of supporting those moms in our community. All right, Greg, if you'd like to go next.
Certainly. Good morning from here and good afternoon for those of you in different time zones. My name is Greg Denise. I'm 65. I'm a father of Carrie Denise, who is the carrier, and she has a son who is almost 5, who also has adrenoleukodystrophy, ALD. And we, of course, like everybody else, has a lot of concerns about what all of this means. I certainly, being a physical education teacher, can appreciate all the ramifications of brain health, and because this is a disease that does affect the neurological aspect of your body. And one of the biggest factors is the cerebral version, which is the childhood version, which can affect children, can start as early as 2-ish up to 10 years old generally. So we're in that realm with Carrie's son. And as I'll describe later for the other questions, how that's certainly affecting her in her daily life more so than herself. But her being the carrier has its own implications. And we have a lot of things we on a daily basis are concerned with. My wife, Marie, and Carrie, my wife and I had 5 girls, including Carrie, 4 of the girls. 3 of them are here and 2 of them are on the East Coast. So I'm from San Diego now. I'm originally from Connecticut. And, our decision to be here was rather simple. We retired almost 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, we retired and moved out here all in within a few months, sold our big house and moved out here in order to be intentionally around Carrie and her son and the other daughters and we have 3 grandchildren right now. We are literally 200 steps from Carrie's door, which is great. We're all in the same apartment complex. It's a 15-minute drive to the other 2 daughters that live here. One has 2 children, the other doesn't have any children yet. But I think she's settling in with a nice gentleman. So this intentional decision to support her is primary right now. And everybody in our family is very supportive and understands that. We have all been tested and in support of Gregory and so forth. But so far, and this, genetics is a changing thing, very dynamic, that all of us understand that things can change, and certainly we're willing to do whatever we need to. But as of right now, somehow our daughter Carrie with this ALD is only one with Gregory. Somehow she mutated it, and there's a lot of unknowns. So we're still, there's a lot of research going on, which is wonderful. Carrie is very involved with the ALD community and participates whenever possible and is very involved, whether it's through social media. And she's also gone to Washington, D.C. and spoken at seminars, and will do whatever it takes because she's just one of those moms that does whatever she can for her son, sometimes not so much for her, which is part of what we all know can be, the case with moms. They just really look out for their children, their offspring. And we're here to help remind her that she's important too, because without her being well, it will affect Gregory's wellness. So I think that summarizes where we come from, but thank you.
Thanks, Greg. And yeah, you touch on such a great point. Something that Remember the Girls and both Angel Aid work so hard to do is, to help carriers get to that place of making sure they are taking care of themselves, their physical, their mental health. As we know, for ALD and some of the other X-linked diseases, females can get symptoms, the physical symptoms of the condition. And, obviously when you're looking after a son, taking them to so many appointments and, just being a mother generally, it's definitely hard to, take the time, as much time as you should, to like be looking out for yourself as well. But I'm glad that you are all there to remind her of that. And I also see you have the X Out ALD 5K shirt on. I have that one. Oh yeah, Outrun ALD. I have that one as well. So
I bet you have a lot, Taylor.
yeah,
Good for you.
it's Greg. All right. And last but not least, we will have Rick.
My name's Rick Hamilton. I'm 37 years old, recently relocated to Texas for our son, being able to travel to just kind of put us in the center to travel for his, the things we're doing for his health. So my wife is a carrier of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. My son is 8 years old and he has Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which is a fatal muscle wasting disease. Typically, heart failure or lung failure occurs late teens, early 20s. My wife has displayed some symptoms from being a carrier of DMD, and she a couple years ago had some heart issues, and but like has already been said that when you have a child who has such a serious disease, that these moms sometimes take a back seat, and just because they care so much about their family. Yeah, I mean that's about where we sit right now, and yeah, thank you for doing this. We've really enjoyed Remember the Girls, and an ability for us to advocate, even though we're just a little ways into the game. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, it's been so great to connect with Nancy and also to follow all the work that you both do for your son and the different campaigns that you have for him as well. So yeah, I think one thing, other than of course all being in the X-Link community, that connects all of us is, that everyone here and everyone's like carrier women in their lives are all involved like in advocacy in some sort of way. So I think that's really amazing. All right, so we're going to jump into some questions. I also see that we're starting to get some questions in the Q&A as well, which is super exciting. Some of you touched on this in the introductions, but I know that all of the women in your lives like found out their carrier status in different ways. So can you speak kind of about how you discuss carrier status with the carriers in your life, or like even the first time that you had a conversation about this and what that looked like?
I think for Nancy, once our son Kilo got diagnosed, we knew that it could be possible that she was a carrier. And one of the things that, sitting in the room receiving my son's diagnosis was instantly came to mind was I need to make sure that Nancy doesn't feel any type of guilt if it is found that she's a carrier, or that being that she passed it along. And yeah, shortly after our son's diagnosis, she had a genetic test done, and we found out she was a carrier. But to this day, I just continue to emphasize that there's nothing we could have done, nothing, there's no way that we could have known, being that there was no history in the family, and that we had children far after a lot of her siblings. So there's plenty of healthy males in the family. But this comes down to like, I don't want her to ever feel guilt, and I really focus on that a lot to make sure that we're in this together. There's no blame to be had.
I was just going to say, I think I mentioned my wife and I met each other in our 30s. We had done some dating. We've been looking for that right person, and she shared her carrier status with me early on. And I, without her in the room to ask her, I don't know if it was ever an issue with other people that she had dated. I just know that for me, it was just it wasn't. It was what it was. It was, I just was going to love her and accept it, and it became our thing. So yeah, for me. And then even this morning leading into this, I was, talking to my wife and daughter. at home? What's daddy going to be doing today? And so we talk openly with my daughter Chloe, who's 14, about her carrier status. What we haven't done is gone to being, she's just 14. We want to wait until she's ready to have the conversations about, oh, hey, I'm serious, you know, I'm in love, you know, those kinds of, I'm going to have babies someday kind of conversations. So we haven't connected the dots to her completely where she'll have to, you know, get immersed in being a carrier, you know, and what that means in terms of having a family yet. But we talk about, and like I said, she's involved with, you know, the society, MPS Society, and fundraising and all those things. So that's it. Back to you, Greg.
Yeah, so I was just, what Taylor asked about, how it came up, and we're fortunate. I mean, I don't know the situation with other diseases and situations all the rest of you have, and there's so many out there, as we know. But in 2016, I believe California started the newborn screening for this ALD. And I think currently there's less than 20. I've seen a few different charts, but some are in the neighborhood of 20 states that do this. And they're pushing, of course, like a lot of diseases, for national testing for this, newborn testing for this, just to find out, because the difficulty is, and this is where I'll call it lucky that California, she was in California or a state that does test. Otherwise, we wouldn't have known. And that's the hard thing about this. It doesn't show itself until it's too late with a boy, especially. My daughter, being the carrier, can be affected later in life, but she wouldn't have known either if it wasn't for California going back the year before, testing all the previous year screening, you know, little blood samples. And luckily they found it, and we got the pretty bad call, but since then we've been educated about it. But that's one of the biggest factors, is making it national, get more screening, get a lot of these things, you know, knowledge is power. And certainly if you don't know, things could be a lot different for us. Again, Gregory hasn't had any symptoms. Every 6 months he goes for MRI, but we're fortunate right now. Everything's good, his adrenal glands and so forth, but you just don't know. And that, for the people that have boys that aren't tested, that don't know, that don't have the newborn screening, the children can all of a sudden show symptoms, and then it's too late because their brain, the myelin in the brain, start to become affected. They die out, and then it's too late. It's very difficult to beat it in that regard. And again, that can be where it becomes fatal for a child up to 10 years old, possibly. So that's a difficult situation.
Yeah, so my situation is similar to Rick's in a way. Our son was diagnosed in 2019, and shortly after, we did what all of the rare disease communities kind of talk about this, and especially in the MECP2 community, is the last thing you should do is go on Google and research it when you learn that you have a rare disease, because it's only going to highlight the worst parts of it. And so after our son's diagnosis, we went on Google and we wanted to learn more about this, and we're sick to our stomachs after about 5 minutes of reading about what this entails, and the immense amount of guilt that my wife felt and still feels. That's when that started. And for us, as a man, my first instinct is to try to come up with a solution or to try to fix the situation. And so, you know, I was very vocal with her about, you know, I don't, you know, how could we have known? This is super rare. You couldn't have known. There's no tests for this. It's not your fault. And in my wife's situation, that only added to her guilt and added to the sense of blame that she feels for being a carrier for this. So instead, and obviously this was a lot of trial and error with a lot of error. Instead of being verbal, you know, being an advocate for her, being a part of the MECP2 community, we're going through IVF, so trying to be as involved as I can in that process and asking questions, that for her is a lot more supportive than, telling her, this isn't your fault, because to her, I mean, in every woman's going to be different, but in her eyes, it is her fault, and there's nothing that can be done about this. And so bringing it up constantly is only going to make things worse. So for us, instead of words, actions are been a lot better as far as being able to offer her the support that she needs. She does feel a lot more supported when somebody is involved in that process, because instead of her basically doing this on her own and having just words of encouragement, she actually has somebody standing next to her who's going through that process with her in a way.
That is such a great point. And I think what, makes X-linked diseases so unique is that, unlike some other genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis, for example, where both parents would have to be carriers for the child to have the disease, X-linked diseases, it just comes from one parent, and the mother, the woman is the carrier. And, I think guilt is one of the biggest themes that our group discusses: guilt of passing it down, guilt of, having to just feel like you are a burden on other people in your lives. Or like Jim touched, he said he wasn't sure if, Crystal in past relationships had people react badly to the carrier status. But I feel like, there's so many reasons that a carrier could feel guilty. But I think it's such great advice that, like, just jumping into the advocacy space with them, and just, that's such a great way for, like, the woman to know that you're there supporting them, and that you just want to be able to be on this journey together. But yeah, you all touched on such great points and themes that are, like, so integral to our group. And, whether it's discussing carrier status with a younger daughter, and Jim, I think the way that you explained that was perfect as well. Like, I think it's important, and every girl is also different, but I think it's great that she knows about her carrier status, and she doesn't need to know all the intricate details at the moment because she is only 14. But those discussions, will continue to happen just over the years as she gets older. So I think that's great. All right. So our next question, and this does kind of go off what Joey was saying as well, but how do you make your carrier wife, mother, daughter, etc., feel supported when she is feeling, like, particularly anxious or sad or stressed about her carrier status?
I think it's just a lot of doing, and like has already been said, just by action, jumping in, don't have hesitation about whatever they need or any drawbacks, just go. I mean, for the last 2.5 years, we've just been all in advocating on all levels. Probably less so for the X-linked carrier, but there's also less platforms, so that's why we appreciate this. But yeah, and then, like, even I think a good outlet for Nancy is being able to talk with other mothers, and being that she's bilingual, she's talked to a lot of mothers in South America and been able to give them information and put them at ease. So I think that's helped her. And sometimes she spends a lot of time doing that, but I think to be supportive, like, I know it's necessary, and I know that we wish, we would like the same for someone to show us. So I think just being supportive of where time is spent, and not ever being like, oh, we don't have time to spend on that. So
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, that's awesome that Nancy's been able to connect with so many other DMD mothers, but also, mothers in South America that she can help provide resources to, if they might not speak English or that. So that's great that she's able to do that and support the community in that way.
yeah.
So our daughter, Carrie, can be very, very emotional at times, which is understandable. And I'm sure all of us have those moments, even ourselves, I would imagine, especially at the times where the testing, as I mentioned before, the testing comes around. because that's every 6 months, every 4 months. And, you know, you're on that cycle. And even though it's not a daily conversation, you know, it's in the back of her mind, certainly. And right in the forefront of her mind in other times. Um, so my wife and I, Marie and I, both support her unconditionally. And that was our intent, is to be here for her. So even the littlest things, when you talk about support, I mean, it might even sound silly. I go over and I walk her dogs. And my wife, matter of fact, just did that this morning for her. So she has 2 dogs on top of it all, right? She's a single parent. Thank goodness she has a very supportive boyfriend, wonderful, wonderful guy. But on the other hand, the father, Gregory's father, is not so supportive. And that whole emotional roller coaster of, not getting into the details, but very, very sometimes daily. I think we've worked it out where it's getting better and better, but that's a factor. Who are the other people involved? And are they supportive or totally not supportive, or almost a negative entity? So for us to be supportive and be here at those times of emotional, psychological need are important to us. Yeah, she's done very well and she's very responsible, but if it's a financial thing, we can do that as well. Even though she's independent and wants to, you know, do her own thing, I think that's important for people to keep in mind. And let's see if I have anything else here. No, I think that covers it. It's just she knows it, and I think she says thank you every day, which isn't necessary, but we will do anything for her and Gregory, and she knows it. And I think that's been very, very helpful.
Amazing. Thanks, Greg.
Yep.
We have a couple of questions coming in on the Q&A. So the first one, and so this would be more for, this could be for Joey, Jim, or Rick, but what has been the most difficult part of your supportive role as the spouse of an X-linked carrier?
So for me, you know, early on when we got the diagnosis, and then we learned that it was, you know, his condition is a duplication on the X chromosome that he would have gotten from her. And so we immediately got carrier tested, and learning that she was a carrier, you know, for me, you go through stages of mourning when you get a diagnosis like that, because you're mourning the life that you thought your child was going to have. And so for me, recognizing that my wife was also going through that while trying to take care of a child, and the child that she's, you know, she sees every day, you know, she's a stay-at-home mom, and, you know, I leave the house to go to work. So she is, you know, with our son as a, you know, constant reminder of that. And so for me, and I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, you know, for me, support, and what I would like is support. You know, I like constant reinforcement, you know, hey, you're doing a great job, you know, keep it up. But she's very different. And so learning that the way, you know, she wants to be supported is going to be very much different than the way I want to be supported. And so my biggest challenge is trying to learn in what ways I can be supportive. And, you know, I think you get into a mentality that, you know, what's good for me is probably going to be good for this person. Like, you know, I would want that. But I think communicating and really learning and listening to the level of support that she really wants was the biggest challenge. And it was very clear that, you know, being an advocate with my actions instead of words, you know, trying to be involved in the MECP2 community, as well as, you know, things like this, you know, going on and advocating for her through a place like Remember the Girls, you know, shows her that I'm being supportive and I'm not doing it in a way that maybe I think is best. So letting her take the lead was important for me. But it was a struggle for a while. You know, we learned our son's diagnosis in the summer of 2019, so it's been almost 2 years. that we've known she's a carrier. And it's taken, a year and a half to really realize that, the level of support that I was trying to offer wasn't exactly what she wanted. So being able to kind of make that adjustment, I think has really helped her to feel supported, especially since, having that rare disease, puts you on an island, but then, not having, like we don't have family, like all of her family is in Michigan. Most of my family's in Nebraska. So our island's pretty small as it is. So it really is just her and me. And so, trying to give her the level of support that she needs was important, obviously, but, failing to do that, it was very humbling, and it makes me, want to advocate and do those things more for sure.
Yeah, it seems like the two of you have a very like open communication in your relationship, which is so important. Because like you said, supporting someone through any type of adversity, I feel like you're not always going to get it right. Everyone's different, but just being able to communicate about what is best to make that person feel supported is amazing. And like you said, I think, all of you for being here, that is the ultimate show of support. Like, I feel like I can imagine that all the women that you're speaking about are, feeling like, I know that if, I was one of them, and knowing that like, the male in my life, my father, husband, etc., was taking the time out like of his Saturday to speak about this topic, like that's just so incredible. Really, it is. So you guys are all awesome. Jim or Rick, did you want to add anything to that?
I think the same was knowing, being a carrier, knowing that she passed something on to our son is definitely the most difficult thing. And I think one of the things, because, similar, like my personality is kind of like, yeah, shake it off, keep going. But I've found with my wife that, sometimes just going to be sad and just be there and hug her. And that's, that's cool. It's not something to be talked out of or downplayed or, you know, try to distract from. That, sometimes that's just the way it is, and give her a hug and sit with her and let it happen.
Yeah.
For me, Taylor, supporting my wife, Crystal, I want to say it's easy. She's such a strong, her smile is this big, she lights up a room everywhere she goes. You would never know that she lost 3 brothers in her life. And so my support for her is relatively easy. She's also a cancer survivor. She's just a very strong person. And when I think of supporting her now, I think of supporting her in her work, dedicating her life to Angel Aid and Rare Moms. That's where I support her. But if I'm going to be honest, I think my biggest challenge was supporting my mother-in-law, Phyllis, who, for one, if I look back on it, it took me a while to come around, honestly. Maybe it's that mother-in-law, son-in-law relationship, that's sometimes can be a little tough. But it took me a while to truly understand what she must try to understand, what she must have gone through to lose 3 of her sons, right? And how it's dramatically affected her life, and how she has pulled herself up and survived and flowered and prospered and is a great mother to Crystal and her brother Richard, and a great grandmother to our daughter. And there's stories upon stories inlaid in this whole relationship. Yeah, that was the most difficult part for me. But I'm happy to say that I've embraced that and grown through it, and so I try to support her as much as I can, and will continue to do that.
That's so great, Jim.
Emotionally and everything. So
yeah. Thank you all for sharing. We do have another question. This one is about daughters who are excellent carriers. So how have you dealt with telling them, or I guess discussing carrier status with them? And do you have any advice for fathers of X-linked carriers? So this would go to Greg and Jim.
Greg, you want
Go
to?
ahead, Jim.
Okay,
Sorry.
what I've kind of touched on that we're really open with Chloe, and we'll take those next steps with her in terms of, you know, what it means to her to have children and that kind of thing. My wife also had an opportunity to put a video together. At one point, she was working in advertising and she had a film crew, and she got an idea that if anything should ever happen to her when my daughter was smaller, this is going back maybe 10 years ago. If anything should ever happen to her, she wanted to tell her story. She wanted Chloe to have a time capsule where she could put it in and say, you know, hi, I'm your mom, and this is our story, and this is what it means to be a carrier of MPS, and talked her through the whole thing. So that CD exists somewhere in storage. But yeah, I think that's how the conversation and the support for Crystal and doing that and just being aware of it, and I guess that will be I don't really know how to wrap that up, but it's there, and so.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool video. And yeah, like you said, you know, your daughter has been surrounded by advocacy and by, you know, such a strong mother who, you know, she's seen doing all these amazing things over her life. So I'm sure that, you know, your daughter's definitely going to follow in her footsteps and, you know, support the MPS community as well. And, you know, if she wants to, it's fully up to her as well. You know, I think that just because someone is affected by an X-linked disease, they don't, you know, a lot of us, I know Kristen and I have kind of made this like our life's mission and do a lot of things day to day. But, you know, it also doesn't have to be like, you know, it can be something that, you know, has just happened to you and, you know, affects your life, but you don't have to make it like the center of your world. Obviously some of us do, and that's okay too. But yeah. Thanks, Jim.
So I can maybe add a little bit to that, if I may, in that the intent and the intentionality of being here, you know, whether speaking to fathers who, you know, there's all kinds, we all know that, but certainly I would expect and hope that most fathers in this given situation would be there for their daughters if possible. And there's all kinds of circumstances, I realize that, but we made it, and you know, Marie and I made it intentional to be here for her. And the participation in the ALD community events, activities, and staying informed, even promoting, and you know, people are all different. We all look at mental health and mental wellness differently, but certainly to promote therapy, life coach, whatever it takes, Facebook groups, with other mothers in this given kind of situation, those are all helpful. We have all decided we're going to be open. We've said it. We're honest as a rule. And even though I could go without saying, I think it's super important. Even things like supporting babysitting, being here. We do this with the dogs. We do it with Gregory on a regular basis because we love to, we want to. And so being there for them in that way too is important. And staying positive. I think the other guys had mentioned that, just staying positive. And Taylor, you've been saying that. It does promote mental wellness, and in the light of such difficulties, to try to stay positive ourselves, even though we're maybe suffering inside. I think it helps to promote that. So that would be my thoughts regarding that.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And that you're able to show support for your daughter in, you know, many types of ways, whether it's like you said earlier, just helping walk her dogs, or now, you know, babysitting your grandson, and able to do those like actions and take action to just be that support system in your daughter's life. All right. So I just wanted to wrap up with just one final question, and if each of you could just answer in like a sentence. So there's like men watching this who have just found out that, you know, a carrier in their life, or that there's a carrier in their life, whether that be their girlfriend, their wife, their daughter. What's something you would say to them?
To let them talk, let them be heard, and just kind of like I said before, no, don't try to distract or be upbeat. Just be there to hear them out, because I think you can find out a lot about what they need if you just hear them out.
I would add to that, being careful. We went through a horrific initial diagnosis. And I think a couple of you have mentioned this about Googling or anything, even doctors. One of the doctors that my daughter had Googled it, and it was horrific. So make sure you find out from experts, find the experts. Don't believe everything you read. That would be my, I think, one piece of advice in that respect, and get the right people involved with you, doctors, etc.
Yeah, I think my piece of advice would just be to be as open as possible about how you're feeling, and you also want her to be as open as possible about how she's feeling, and being on the same page, I think, is the first step to really being able to, you know, support her and get through it together. Because at the end of the day, I mean, it's your child and hers. If you have a spouse who has an X-linked disorder, and you know, it doesn't do her any good if you're not on board. You guys aren't on the same page. So, you know, ask questions. You know, for me, it was, you know, how can I be supportive? You know, what can I do, instead of, you know, thinking that I'm going to, you know, have the right answer. You know, there is no manual for this. There's, you know, she doesn't know either, really. You know, she's going through it, you know, with the support of, you know, others around her that maybe have gone through the same thing. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's new for her and it's going to be new for you. So, just, you know, if you guys are on the same page and asking questions and communicating effectively, then, you know, it goes a long way, for sure.
Jim, did you have anything you wanted to add? Last thoughts on what you would tell
I think the other gentlemen have really said it. Life's full of challenges, right? So this is just another challenge, and we just do our best, right? Do the best we possibly can.
Definitely. Well, that is a great note to end on. I wanted to thank the four of you so much for being here and taking the time out of your Saturday to talk about this. As I mentioned, this will be recorded, so you'll be able to share it. I know that Crystal told me, Jim, that she isn't watching live because that you were a little bit nervous. So she'll be able to watch the recording after. So I'll make sure that you all have that as well. But yeah, this was such a great conversation. And, you know, I'm so glad to hear how you support the women carriers in your life. And I'm sure that so many women in our group will find a lot of comfort in watching this. And, you know, that they'll know that being a carrier doesn't need to make them feel, you know, isolated and, you know, different. And it's really just about open communication and talking about how you can be supported. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. If you want to learn more about Remember the Girls, for anyone watching, you can go to our website, rememberthegirls.org.